Have you ever wanted to apply shadows to your digital art, but just can't seem to understand how to do it? We're going to talk about that today. So, why should we care about shadows in the first place? Shadows are really great at creating a sense of depth, and they can also be used for contrast in an image. If you want something to look 3D and more natural or realistic, shadows are a great way to go about doing that. What you want to make sure is that in your application, you have the ability to add what are called layers. Layers allow you to work on independent levels of your image and edit them independently, almost like layers of a sandwich. You can stack ingredients on top of each other and remove any that you don't want, and alter ones that are already there. Layers act in the same way. So when I create shadows in my images, I use the multiply layer. The multiply layer is essentially taking whatever color that you're painting with, and it's creating a translucent copy of that color over all of the layers beneath. When you do this, shadows become more obvious. It creates a darker contrast in your image. So what are some things that you need to think about before you go ahead and use a multiply layer in your image to create those shadows? First, you want to ensure that your flat colors are established with a nice clean painting or drawing. Multiply layer works best when the images beneath it are at a sense of completion, or at least semi-completion. Next, you'll want to take a multiply layer and add that above your other layers. You want to literally click and drag it so that it is at the topmost position of all the other layers. This will make it so that whatever color you apply will apply to everything, every layer beneath. Next, you'll want to go to the opacity adjuster of that particular layer, and you'll want to slide that down. Using a multiply layer at 100% strength will be a little too strong for the eye. So sliding it back down to somewhere between 60 or maybe even 30% will give you a better sense of how a shadow can rest more comfortably into an image. Typically, when you apply color to this multiply layer, you want to aim for what shadows are mostly found in, the cool colors. So your blues, purples, maybe a bluish green, but typically the blues, your cool colors, are going to give you those really nice contrasting shadows that contrast against the light of your image. Now, sometimes shadows are warm, and you may want to experiment. Take the time with that multiply layer to see what different colors do to the layers that are underneath. You might find something really interesting. Now, what are some of the pros of using a multiply layer for your shadows? Well, it gives you some stress-free wiggle room. Whenever you make a change to that multiply layer, if you make a really horrible mistake and the undo key just doesn't cut out enough or do enough correction to solve your problem, what you can do is you can just delete that layer or hide it, and then create another multiply layer and start again. That doesn't damage anything that's beneath it. It's all on its own layer, and so whatever you do, you have the freedom to play around and you can't hurt the images that are underneath. Another way that you can help redefine this process is by making cleaner lines. If you use a selection mask, usually with a selection tool or a lasso tool, and you grab whatever particular portions of the image that you want to use your shadows in, you can get much more exact shadows and not worry about overdoing it, or spilling over, or going outside of whatever area you're hoping to color. Now, this process is generally really good and really positive. It doesn't have a whole lot of drawbacks, unless you tend to be disorganized. And you tend to go back and add multiply layers. Then you might start forgetting what layer has which correction on it, and your shadows may become a little muddied as a result when the shadows of layer A start to overlap the shadows of layer B and C, and if you're not careful, you can end up with a really messy looking image. The other thing is that sometimes when you use a multiply layer, the image can tend to look a little more digital. It just depends on the texture of your brush, how strong the opacity is, and the overall quality of the image beneath it. As far as what programs can actually use multiply layers, I personally use Photoshop and Clip Studio Paint, as well as Affinity Designer and Affinity Photo, and even Procreate. And all those programs absolutely have options for layers, and especially using a multiply layer. There are other programs that offer these features, but you'd have to look into that on your own. You just want to make sure that whatever software you're using has layers for options, and then within those layer adjustments has the multiply layer option. Now, is this the only way to add shadows to an image? No, but it is the most efficient way to add in shadows. The other way that you could go about it is potentially using a normal layer and just directly applying the specific values that you're aiming to create that sense of shadow with. This will tend to work better with brushes that mimic a more traditional media. So, applying shadows and whatever method that you want to use will always end up being a personal decision. If flat style or line work is what you're looking to paint, there are definitely valid reasons to pursue either of those paths. But if you're looking to add dimension and realism to your images, applying shadows is a must. So, get out there, experiment, and see what you're able to paint next.